Hello everybody and welcome back to another Marvel Crisis Protocol character spotlight. And today we are taking a look at Gamora, one of the kind of lesser used Guardians of the Galaxy, not because she's bad in any way, shape, or form, just because the Guardians have such an insane roster. But yeah, she's actually a really solid character that, in my opinion, probably doesn't see as much play as she deserves to, because yeah, I mean, I just think she's really cool and she does a lot of really neat stuff. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get into what some of that neat stuff she does is. Starting with her stat line here, she's coming in with 333, so nothing too remarkable there. 6 stamina, 4 threat, size 2, and a long mover. Of course, the long move kind of being the standout thing here. She is very fast. She's on a small base, so being the long move, she can technically punch the middle line round one if it's lined up nicely. But she can't grab the middle objective point without a second move or anything like that. But still, very real threat range for her. And yeah, just a solid kind of base here. The defensive stats are definitely on the lower side. One of her biggest downsides is she is on the squishier side, but she has a couple pieces of tech to kind of help make up for that. Going into attacks, she's got a couple here. The first one is the God Slayer attack. This is a range 2 6 dice physical attack. It's 6 dice on a basic 0 cost attack for a 4 threat is pretty solid. And it is a builder attack, so she can gain power based on the damage dealt. Again, with that 6 dice, that's going to be pretty good for that. And if you deal damage, again, pretty good for that. After the attack is resolved, the target character will gain the bleed condition. So generally not considered one of the strongest conditions, but fairly consistent on a 6 dice attack to be able to hand out a bleed. So yeah, can't hurt. And yeah, it's a really solid builder here. Obviously, only being range 2 is kind of its biggest downside, but hits pretty hard for the 4th threat level, so pretty solid so far. Going into her spender here, this is a 4 cost spender, Cosmic Assassin. This is going to be a range 3, so a little bit further reaching than her regular attack, and it's also going to be throwing 6 dice, so no extra dice for you here. However, it's got the Wild Pierce, so yeah, that's obviously a really solid trigger to have. And the Rapid Strike trigger. After this attack is resolved, this character may make an additional Cosmic Assassin attack without paying the power cost. The additional attack must target another character within range 2 of the original target character, and may be any distance from this character. The additional attack will not have the Rapid Strike special rule. So yeah, basically it's got a guaranteed kind of ricochet style effect here, and yeah, I mean that's pretty solid on a 6 dicer with a Pierce. 4 power is definitely a little bit more on the expensive side, but we'll see in a minute that she has something that makes these attacks hit even harder than they already do as 6 dice attacks. That kind of make this definitely worth paying for when you can. So yeah, even though at first it kind of seems a little underwhelming, being the same amount of dice as the God Slayer, you get to throw it twice, which is obviously really good. So obviously you do need 2 targets for that, so something to keep in mind. She definitely prefers going in on kind of 2 characters or more at a time. She isn't, she's not bad for the 1v1 necessarily, but she kind of isn't going to do her maximum unless she's in a kind of 2v1 or more situation. But yeah, solid attack profiles so far. And then we get into more damage that she can do, as well as a little bit of extra action compression and mobility with the Assassin Leap superpower. This is going to be a 2 cost. This character is thrown small. It does not suffer damage if it collides with another character or terrain feature, and it can only be used once per turn. So yeah, just throw yourself at another character to try and do some extra damage or to get closer so you can use your attacks. This is just generally pretty good. I mean, she's only a size 2, so you're not doing too much damage. You're really most of the time using this for the movement, but sometimes that extra little bit of damage can be the difference between taking a character down or not. So obviously in those cases, it's really good. If she can make an attack round 1, she long moves up the board and someone's close enough she can punch them, there's a very good chance she'll build at least 1 power to then be able to leap into them as well. So kind of just putting some extra damage out really early in the game is something you can kind of get with this superpower. So pretty solid for stuff like that as well. Next, we get into her first piece of defensive tech here, and that's going to be Martial Prowess. This is a 2 cost superpower that says when you're targeted by an attack within range 2, you can use the superpower. Instead of rolling dice equal to your defense, you're going to roll 5 dice no matter what side it was on. Not that it really changed much for you anyways here, being 3, 3, and 3. Then, if you suffer no damage from the attack, after the attack is resolved, the attacker will suffer 2 damage. So this is pretty solid if you're fighting characters at range 2. Throwing 5 defense dice is pretty good, and at that point you're kind of playing to the kind of swinginess of MCP dice, and if you manage to luck out and you don't take any damage from the attack, you're just going to plink them back for 2, so definitely give them some pause on attacking into her with characters that are lower on health. That is definitely something they're going to have to consider. So yeah, really, really solid piece of defensive tech here. Of course, the big drawback being it only works within 2, and it's going to cost you power, which, I mean, yeah, she can build power pretty effectively, but she also has a fair bit she likes to spend it on. So definitely something you got to kind of manage with her is how much you're leaping and cosmic assassinating versus martial prowessing. So definitely something to consider, but is still a really, really nice piece of defensive tech to have. And yeah, just a really actually valuable part of her kit there. So always worth kind of remembering she has that, because it can definitely catch you off guard if you're not ready for it, especially if you're playing against her. So yeah, definitely a good superpower there. Next, we move on to Deadliest Woman in the Galaxy. This is kind of her signature power. When this character makes an attack, it may change one die result to a hit for each wild in the attack roll, and this is really, really good. On 6 dice, the odds of rolling a wild are pretty solid, and that wild effectively counting as 2 successes unless you already had a perfect roll, in which case you're not complaining, or if you had a bunch of skulls, in which case maybe you are complaining, but um, it's just really, really good. Your dice odds are significantly improved by this. Having it on the Cosmic Assassin makes those wilds even more meaningful with the Wild Pierce, of course. So now your 1 success effectively counts for 3, assuming again you had something to change and your opponent had something to change as well. But if neither of those cases are true, you're probably happier anyways. So yeah, this is just really, really good, and it kind of makes that weight of dice, that being able to throw the 6 dice a second time, even more meaningful, because that's more opportunities to get those wilds, to get those pierces, to get those Deadliest Woman in the Galaxy triggers there, and all of those things are going to add up really, really quick. Gamora is very, very capable of taking things out super quickly once she gets rolling. So yeah, Deadliest Woman in the Galaxy. Obviously, it's a little bit dicey. You need to roll those wilds. If you don't roll them, you're not having the greatest time in the world, but makes her hit well above her weight class. If you're rolling, even just an average amount of wilds, you're getting, let's say 2 in every 3 attacks, is pretty solid. So yeah, definitely a really valuable part of her card here, and kind of her signature move there. And lastly, we come to her main, or her other piece of defensive tech here. I shouldn't say main, because I think martial prowess is probably the one she'll get more value out of in the average game. Really depends what type of team you're going up against, but this last one is stealth. So characters have to be within 3 to target her, and that does pair pretty nicely with martial prowess. It kind of gives them a very small window of being able to get around her defenses. So you can kind of play to that as well with your assassin leap to close that gap and make sure you're trying to stay within 2 for martial prowess. And then their longer range characters will need to move in if they want to hit you. So yeah, definitely does give your opponent that agency to kind of be like, okay, if they have the mobility to put themselves at range 3 of you and make those attacks, she is quite vulnerable. Having only 3, 3, 3, and then 6 stamina is nothing too crazy for a 4 threat. She will go down very, very quickly if you're not careful, but still really, really useful pieces of defensive tech that work pretty nice together. So yeah, overall, it gives her a better defensive profile than she has on paper, but you still got to be somewhat careful, because she will just die if you're not careful with her. And lastly, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the flip side here, where, as you can see, absolutely nothing changes except the art. She's got a little bit of battle damage there, but otherwise, health is the same, everything else is the same, so unless I'm totally blind and missing something, she's the exact same on the flip, which is nice. Having the 6-6 split is certainly better than kind of a lot of characters that have like a 6-5 or a 5-6 split, so yeah, that definitely helps with the defensiveness there. A 12 overall stamina pool isn't bad for a 4 threat at all, especially one with pretty decent defensive tech. Just, again, stuff that can be played around, and you got to be mindful of that with her. Going into tactics cards, she's a member of 3 different tactics cards. The first one is going to be the Daughters of Thanos tactics card, which is played by either Gamora or Nebula. When one of them makes an attack action, or I guess it's played by both of them. When one of them makes an attack action, after the attack is resolved, they're both going to pay a power to play this card, and then the one that did not make the initial attack gets to make an attack targeting the same target character. This is really, really solid. I mean, this can be used in a lot of really interesting ways with both of those characters, but if you're using it to have Gamora make an attack, you can actually use it into a Cosmic Assassin attack, and then that Rapid Strike is allowed to target a different character because that's no longer the attack that the card has given you. So, yeah, obviously that gives you some kind of really interesting avenues to kind of play with that attack, and I think it makes things really, really interesting. So yeah, it's just kind of a cool little thing she can do. In general, giving Gamora the free attack is generally more valuable than giving it to Nebula, just because Gamora most of the time will be hitting harder. But if Nebula can spend her, there's an argument for her as well. Either way, it's a really, really solid card for just kind of being like, this model needs to go down, so I'm going to get 3 attacks into them this round. And if Gamora is involved, potentially a couple attacks into a couple other characters as well. So yeah, it's a really, really cool card. If you're bringing both characters, definitely worth considering. Personally, I really, really like this card, and I try to bring it whenever I'm bringing the 2 of them. So yeah, I think it's solid, but your mileage may vary. I know for a while it wasn't really seeing much play, but I think that's just partially because, again, Gamora kind of doesn't see as much play as a lot of the other Guardians, unfortunately, just for, being in that very, very competitive 4-threat slot for Guardians, where they have so many good models in that range. But she is certainly a very, very solid piece, and this card definitely contributes to that. The second card here is another team-up card. This one is for an assignment. It's a team-up with Agent Venom, where basically he gets to do something based on all of the Guardians he is nearby when he plays this card. And for Gamora, if he's near Gamora, he gets to throw himself medium. So, unfortunately for Agent Venom, he does take damage for colliding on this throw, so you do have to be careful with that, but it can be a really cool way to get some extra damage out with him, and yeah, I mean, it's not a bad, extra little synergy if you're bringing the 2 models anyways, and you kind of have a plan with this card. But overall, this card is really one of those ones where, personally, I've yet to see it really have a big splash in competitive play, but it is really fun, and if you kind of have, a lineup of them ready to go, it can do some pretty cool things. So, yeah, definitely a neat card, but probably not the most competitive one in the kit, and really it's Agent Venom's card more than Gamora's card, so not really too much worth talking about for this video. And the last one here, I actually forgot about this one going into making this video because it's brand new, is Veterans of the Annihilation War. And this is another team-up card with, this time, Nova. So during the power phase, Gamora and Nova can play this card. So Gamora and Nova are both going to gain a superpower off of this. So Gamora is going to gain World Mind Uplink. When this character is defending against an attack or making a dodge roll, it may reroll up to 2 of its defense or dodge dice. This is actually really, really nice for Gamora. It makes your martial prowess feel a lot better. Your odds of kind of dealing the damage back to them suddenly go way up. And at that range, 3, where she's really, really vulnerable, suddenly it feels a little bit better for that as well. She's also quite susceptible to dodges, or terrain throws usually, so being able to kind of increase her dodge defenses there a little bit is also quite nice for her. So yeah, this is a pretty solid superpower to be able to give Gamora. When I first read this card, when Nova was first revealed, I was kind of on it. On this side of it, I didn't really think it was actually all that good, but thinking about it now and actually kind of looking at it from Gamora's point of view, I actually really, really like this half of the card. On the other side of the card, I also really, really like this side, and I like this one from the moment I read the card, is giving Nova her ability to turn wilds, or use wilds to create extra hits in the attack roll. And as we already kind of established, that's just a really, really good superpower. So yeah, I think this card has a lot of benefits for both characters. It is only for 1 round, so something you do have to consider. Make sure you're getting a lot of value out of the 2 characters the round that you're playing this. But yeah, I think it's a really, really cool card. And obviously, the character hasn't even released at the time I'm recording this, or the time that this video is going up. But I think this card has the potential to be really, really interesting in competitive play. So yeah, I think it's a good card, but we'll see. I've been wrong before, so without further ado, we're going to go ahead and move on to affiliations and things. So, looking at affiliations here, she's a member of two affiliations, those being A-Force and Guardians of the Galaxy. I think we're going to start with Guardians of the Galaxy here, just because this is kind of her main home. And there, of course, you have Star-Lord as the leader, giving out those Winging It tokens, allowing you to get some rerolls. And these are really, really nice for Gamora. First of all, they give her those defensive rerolls we were talking about being so valuable with that team-up card with Nova, so obviously really, really nice for that. They also give her offensive rerolls, which the fun thing with the kind of timing on this is you can choose to do those rerolls before you do your Deadliest Woman in the Galaxy modifications. So basically you can fish for some extra wilds in those attacks to try and get some more hit results in there. So it actually, if you're using a Winging It token, you're effectively rolling 8 dice before considering criticals and things like that, which means on average you should be getting at least one wild pretty much every attack. Of course, you want to have a Winging It token on every attack, so that's something to consider as well. But still, really, really cool. And hey, if you use that Winging It and you roll into wild, that's potentially giving you more successes than just the two it would normally get you on any other characters. So yeah, it's a really good leadership, and Gamora definitely takes advantage of it in a big way. Other things for Guardians, of course, her other team up card members here, Nebula, Nova, and Agent Venom, are all a part of the affiliation, and they all obviously work well together for those team up reasons. That's definitely something worth considering there. You've got some other kind of interesting things, like you have stuff like Cosmic Ghost Rider, who can light a bunch of characters on fire, and Gamora definitely appreciates that because she can bounce between multiple targets at a time. So it's not as good at it as he used to be now that he's once per turn, thankfully. But still, definitely something kind of meaningful for her. Being able to kind of get the good damage spikes in on her builders in the early game is really, really important for her, just to have that power economy going. So stuff like that is helpful for her. You have characters like Beta Ray Bill, who can kind of throw out some shocks on the enemy team, and I think Star-Lord can as well, actually. And that'll help with her survivability as well. So a couple things there just to kind of help keep her in the running. The one kind of downside she has with the Guardians is that she is a little bit more close quarters than many of the Guardians that are kind of commonly run. So she's a little bit of a target, and she doesn't necessarily love that extra heat, but they do have some great tools to support her. She's also a huge fan of cards like Lovable Misfits. Potentially giving her an extra attack or some movement is really, really good. And Galaxy's Greatest is just kind of a ridiculous card, but again with her, where one die potentially is a little bit more valuable because the Deadliest Woman in the Galaxy there, it can matter a lot for her. So yeah, it's a really, really solid card for her. And then also just that Rapid Strike, letting you make this attack twice. So now it's 2 7-dicers, and that suddenly becomes really, really scary. So yeah, there's some really, really solid cards for her in the affiliation, and some good synergies all around. I mean, she still makes pretty much every Guardians roster I run, and she doesn't hit the table every game, but I do think she's a really valuable member of their team. The other affiliation she's a member of, and I always kind of forget that she's here, is A-Force, because she's not really one of the first models you think of usually when you think of A-Force, but she doesn't mind the affiliation at all. It's She-Hulk's leadership, of course, so when an allied character is damaged by an enemy effect, another allied character will gain a power. This is pretty solid for her. I mean, she's one of those models that she can operate pretty well on low power, but when she has power to spend, she can really make a lot of use out of it. Making Cosmic Assassin attacks can do a lot of really meaningful things. Having more power for martial prowess is always good. That sort of thing is really, really nice for her. So yeah, I definitely think she has a solid place in the affiliation. She-Hulk herself also helps her because she has that bodyguard ability there, where if it's one of those attacks coming at Gamora from that range she really doesn't like, She-Hulk can eat the attack and then give the power back over to her, so that way, maybe the next attack she can martial prowess or something like that. Obviously, it has to be in range 2 for that, but still, there's kind of some interesting lines you can kind of do with the two characters together. So she works pretty well with the leader, just kind of out the gate there. As far as other models in the affiliation, I don't know if too many of the other models are doing all that much for her. Some of their cards are pretty solid for her, like the anti-control and the extra defense dice from a couple of their cards. I think it's Stalwart Determination and A-Force Assemble are both pretty solid for her, so she definitely appreciates those. And characters like Shuri being able to throw some rerolls her way are definitely appreciated as well. But otherwise, I don't think there's anything too crazy. Okoye has kind of the exact same synergy that She-Hulk does, so bodyguard the first attack onto Okoye, get the power from martial prowess the second one sort of deal is definitely something you can kind of play around with. And I think that's a neat little combo for her. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, I think she's a solid pick in the affiliation. Of course, they also have a fairly competitive fourth threat slot, so that's something you kind of got to consider with them as well. But she's definitely capable of holding her own here and does reasonably well under the leadership. I think you don't want her to be punched too much. You really don't want her to be generating power for the other members of your team, but funneling power towards her can definitely be really, really solid. As far as other affiliations go, I think she can be an interesting splash in a few different places. I think the big thing she's kind of looking for is dice consistency. Whether that's offensive or defensive, she kind of appreciates both a fair bit. It's part of why the winging it leadership is so good for her in Guardians. So, something like Defenders could be kind of interesting. Again, very competitive fourth threat slot there, but being able to take something like Daredevil's leadership and say, hey, I'm going to get a bunch of rerolls because I've pounced and I'm now surrounded by a bunch of enemies. So I'm going to have all these rerolls and I'm going to be bouncing my attacks and hitting multiple targets. So she definitely kind of plays to that game plan pretty interestingly. So something like that works all right for her. I think it's definitely an interesting place for her. Other ones, just kind of the standard reroll ones. Black Panther 1 and Wakanda is solid. Iron Man or Invincible Iron Man for Shield is relatively decent for her. Something like Midnight Suns can be kind of interesting, giving her a bump. She usually has, like, if she's been rolling okay, she has the power to burn on stuff like those rerolls or that bump. And of course, those rerolls could potentially get you more power if they work out for you, especially if they roll those wilds. But yeah, the bump could be kind of interesting for her in Midnight Suns, being able to give her a little bit of extra mobility. The pounce is nice, but it's not always enough, so being able to have that just that little bit extra also means she can get onto the midline in a single move, and then she's kind of guaranteed able to punish anything on that middle point, so that definitely helps for her a lot as well. So yeah, she's definitely a fan of those places, and of course Wakanda also has Shuri, as we kind of mentioned, and Okoye with A-Force, so she appreciates those models as well, and could be kind of cool if you're doing for like a dual roster sort of thing. Another interesting one with her is some of the leaderships that play around with wilds. Actually, another one of those is Wakanda, isn't it? M'Baku does that, doesn't he? His might just be on defense. No, it's just on attack. So his leadership on attack once per turn basically has her Deadliest Warrior in the Galaxy thing, and if you really want to roll the dice on it, if you're running like M'Baku and then you've got Shuri for some rerolls, you can really push to get those wilds going, and now suddenly one wild is worth 3 successes on a regular attack, or 4 if you're counting the Pierce on her spender. So, you're definitely playing the dice game there. If you don't get the wild, you're not feeling great about it, but it can be really, really solid for her. So yeah, him, and then I think the other one is MODOK in Crimson. Has a very, very similar superpower here, where as long as you are holding or contesting an objective token, you can use your wilds to create hits or blocks. Also works on defense, which she does really appreciate, a little bit of defensive tech here and there. So she can be an interesting one in either of those. You're very much praying to get those wilds in both of those cases, though. So you're playing the dice game there, but sometimes that's what it is, and she's definitely one of those characters that does like to play the dice game, so kind of something to keep in mind if you're running her. But if you don't like playing the dice game and you still want to run Gamora, one of the places you can run her would be something like Steve 3 Avengers, where as long as you got a hit, you could then spend 1 power to turn another die into a wild, and then use Deadliest Woman in the Galaxy to turn another die into a hit. And that's really, really fun. The other way you could do this is if you already have a wild, but you don't have a hit, you could create a hit using Deadliest Woman in the Galaxy and then use the leadership to create another success. But unfortunately, at that point, you've already used Deadliest Woman in the Galaxy to modify your dice. So creating another wild doesn't actually do anything for you at that point. But still, you can turn a hit into 3 successes, or a wild into 3 successes, or a wild into 3 successes. It's pretty good. So yeah, it's definitely a really, really cool place for her, and one of my favorite kind of pieces of tech that she has. I really haven't played around with that as much as I want to, but definitely a cool place for her. But yeah, I think that just about does it for Gamora here. At the end of the day, I think Gamora is a really, really cool character. She's definitely a little underplayed, but I can understand why. She is a very dicey model. If she's not rolling those wilds on attacks, she really doesn't feel all that great. Still throwing out six dicers does feel solid, but without any consistency kind of built into her kit, she can feel a little lackluster at times. And I've definitely had games where she just kind of dies immediately, and those do feel rough. But when she gets to pop off, she does so much work. And if you can give her the resources, if you can give her access to characters that let her reroll, whether that's through, the Guardian's leadership or something like a Shuri sitting at the back just giving her rerolls all the time. She really, really appreciates those sorts of things, and they really make her shine and do a lot of work on the battlefield for a four threat. She's definitely one of those models where if she's rolling, your opponent is terrified. So yeah, I think she's a really, really solid model, and in my opinion, is a little criminally underplayed. I don't see her talked about nearly as much as some of the other four threat guardians. And again, it is a very competitive spot for them. Of course, Beta Ray Bill and Agent Venom are both incredibly good models as well. So definitely something that is, there's a trade-off there if you're choosing to run her over them, but I think she fills a really, really solid role as just this super hard-hitting attrition piece. She has to be protected. You got to be somewhat careful with her. You got to play with those ranges. You got to know how to abuse that, get cover if you're not in range 2 of your opponents, that sort of thing, to really be able to push and keep her survivability as high as humanly possible, and then just take advantage of how hard she hits, because she does hit like an absolute truck. And just the more dice you roll with her, the better chance you're going to have at getting those wilds. So being able to use Cosmic Assassin, being able to put Galaxy's Greatest tokens on her, using Winging It tokens on her, those sorts of things are all going to make her feel a lot better. So yeah, definitely a character that I really, really enjoy playing, and I hope more people kind of start playing her again, especially with this new team up card with Nova. Hopefully that shines a little bit of a spotlight back on her, because I really, really like the character and want to see her hit the table more often. But that is going to do it for my thoughts on Gamora here. Very curious to hear what you guys think. Are there any synergies or tactics with Gamora that I didn't talk about here that you guys have? Definitely curious to hear what you guys think down below. But that's going to do it for my part. So until next time, have a great day, everybody. Peace.